Forging Blade, Part 2. Our beautiful blue birthplace, a sphere of water suspended in space. Earth. It was like a beacon of hope shining in the abyss, or a helpful guidepost suspended in the darkness. Nothing would ever erase the Earth from our thoughts. When did I last see it with my own eyes? Was it while I was in Geosynchronous?
Mm-hmm.
4 bits above the planet during the DM engine orientation exam, or during my observational visit at a lunar base. Or maybe it was. In any event, I had not seen it when the white whale set sail. That much I was certain of. Our gaze was locked ahead of us at that time, towards the great alien armies blocking our path, towards the unknown abyss glimpsed through their soldiers. That was all we saw as we departed. We had no time to glance back at our beautiful birthplace, and I will never again see it with my own eyes, because it was annihilated during that battle. Nagi Kentaro was dreaming. It was a dream of the home he lost 2 years prior. In a dream, memories are like writing in the sand. Upon waking, that sand is scattered in the wind, erasing all signs of life. Nagi awoke in the darkness and feeling as though he had not seen Earth vanish in the wind, shed tears of loss. We have lost it. The Earth. And then, he remembered. He was now waking from sleep. He had been knocked out from the impact, and had just regained consciousness. He was Nagi Kentaro. At one time, he was a brigadier general in the Earth United Government Forces. Now, he is responsible for capturing the White Whale as part of the Earthwide Colonization Project. The Earthwide Colonization Project. It was a project that aimed to scatter the seeds of life across space so they might flower on in other celestial bodies, in preparation for the destruction of their home planet. It was forwarded up by the humans, the dominant force of the Earth, to prevent the complete annihilation of everything that once lived on it. The United Government had known of the impending destruction for the last 30 years, or rather, it was formed as a result of that realization. One day, the Earthlings became aware that we were not alone in space, that countless other races existed in its vast expanses. And at that time, they became aware of the coming crisis. The multitude of races had divided themselves into 2 distinct factions based on their physical structures, and were locked in an endless struggle. It was likely that their conflict would spread to Earth. Upon learning of this, the Earthlings began amassing the majority of their supplies in preparation, and the Earth United Government was formed. Personnel, wealth, and resources were collected and divided between their plans for defense and survival. Of course, there were many who refused to join under the umbrella of the United Government, but the whole world understood the gravity of the situation, so the few dissatisfied dissenters went ignored by the majority. Thus, the United Government developed parallel programs that would serve as wings to guide them forward, one to propel the alien forces, and one to ensure their escape and survival. Among these were humanoid mobile weaponry, dolls, a trump card to develop the repel alien armies, using technology not of the Earth. They had no internal combustion systems of their own, relying instead on power transferred from a main generator. They were an all-purpose weapon miniaturized into a small frame, and just under 10 years, a considerable number were manufactured. The Earth's defense forces were well prepared. Or they should have been. Seems we were overly optimistic. was Nagi's frank recollection. Mankind's strength had made rapid improvements thanks to the development of the dolls and DM Shenjin's power source, but there was still nothing they could do. The two alien forces clashed in the planet's vicinity, their strength vastly outmatching that of the Earthlings. A single ant could not protect its nest while a dragon and tiger fought overhead, even if the ant became dozens of times more powerful. All mankind could do was entrust their future to a handful of immigration ships to escape, to survive, to flourish somewhere. Nagi and his crew turned their backs on the Earth and escaped, precisely because they had carried those hopes. The flash behind them, they turned their eyes from the destruction of their home planet. And so, the white whale began its journey, captained by Nagi. But, at the end of their 2-year journey, the aliens had finally caught up to them. One of the two factions had pursued them and attacked them with biological weapons. The bioweapons were fearsome, and the shell of the residential area, they phased through the hull and boarded the ship. Within each of them was an antimatter core, and they could not be disposed of carelessly while they were on board. Their destruction would pose a great danger to the white whale. A single young man had saved the ship from that predicament. His valiant efforts repelled the bioweapons, but he vanished along with his doll afterwards. However, that did not mean the white whale was safe. A strange planet had appeared before the ship, one that was not marked on the space chart they had acquired before departing the Earth. Why had nobody noticed the planet before then? Was it because we were too busy dealing with the pursuit forces? Or the white whale's hull was seriously damaged, and they were unable to escape the planet's gravitational pull. Nagi, who had been issuing commands from the bridge, knew that an emergency landing was unavoidable, and did his best to minimize the damage to the ship during the planetfall. Then, the crash came. And after that, nothing. He had a dream of his beloved Earth while unconscious. And then, he woke. Where? Yo, Nagi, you've come too. Nagi heard a familiar voice respond. He was the White Whale's chief engineer and his friend of several decades, Commander Vandam. Although they were no longer the same rank, their friendship had continued unaltered. What a situation, Vandam. Not that great, but I guess you could say we lucked out. Vandam briefly explained what had happened. The white whale had fractured the upper hemisphere, and each piece of the ship crashed separately, throwing the bridge and a few surrounding sections that crashed in their vicinity. None of the pieces were anywhere in sight. And what of the planet? Is it capable of sustaining life? Vandam pointed to his right without a word. Nagi turned his head, at a loss for words. An enormous crack ran down the outer wall, through which the night sky could be seen. So, we can breathe? That's not all. The temperature's around 20 Celsius. The gravity is 0.94 G. And radiation levels are safe. It's habitable without any kind of protection. How did we end up on an uncharted planet by chance? If it wasn't by chance, it was someone's plan. We should make sure to thank them. It was as Vandam said, though it was unfortunate that the ship was in pieces and it did not survive the entire journey from Earth. It was nothing short of a miracle that its final stop was a place people could inhabit without the need for terraforming. Nagi thought it must have been the work of a higher power, either god or demon. And what about the rest of the bridge group? Everyone's at work, scouting the surroundings, recovering the engine, gathering unusable materials, stuff like that. There's a ton of things to do. One's still snoozing. A young female operator was slumped over her console nearby where Nagi lay. If you remembered right, she was 2nd Lieutenant May. I was almost in last place. I'm getting too old for this. You're still a spring chicken. Phantom gave Nagi a hard slap on the back. It wasn't surprising for him to praise him. Nagi had remained on the bridge as it shook and entered the atmosphere, guiding the ship until the very end. For while the rest of the crew had braced themselves for impact, he was still at the helm. It was no surprise that he would wake up late. Although the chief engineer had not braced himself for impact either, instead managing the auxiliary engine and broken DM engine during the crash. He had still woken up first, but his stubborn body was far from the norm, so it did not come as a surprise to anyone. A thin voice informed them that the final crew member had awoken. May stood up and surveyed her surroundings. All the bridge crew seemed to be unharmed.
Captain, Chief Engineer.
May stood at attention hastily and saluted. Nagi gave her a weak smile. Don't fuss over the formalities during a time like this. Yeah, really. We're on this together like Robinson Crusoe.
Yes, understood.
May raised her arm to a salute once again, but started herself and simply bowed her head. She appeared to be a young, obedient girl. Right before Nagi smiled, he remembered the young man that had vanished in space. The young man who Nagi had watched grow up, who had saved the white whale. Well, maybe a bit early to say we're saved. We have to fend for ourselves from here on. I'm afraid they'll have to forget about him for now. And Nagi swiftly decided upon matters and began issuing orders. The crew members, all who had left the scout, returned. One by one started carrying them out. They began fending for themselves like that, though, unlike Robinson Crusoe, they did not have a homeland to return to across the sea. Nearly every section of the immigrant ship's hull had their own artificial gravity generators, thanks to the foresight of their designer. They were already expecting the voyage to last for quite some time, so they took measures to make sure the crew's bodies did not adapt to the zero-gravity environment. The artificial gravity generators consumed large amounts of energy, so there was a fierce opposition against including them, but the ship's goals were to spread and maintain Earthkind and continue their lifestyle was so important too. So, the interiors of the residential sectors were fashioned like cities on Earth and built so that they could set up on the surface of a planet. Such accommodations were very taxing on the ship's resources, and with new DM engine technology, they were able to manage. But more importantly, the gravity generators had absorbed the impact of the crash. The bridge had its own generator, so they were able to escape any serious damage. Other sections with their own generators had probably survived the crash as well. First of all, we must locate the other pieces of the ship. First, we'll locate the residential sector, then the DMN sector, and third, the lifehold. The crew listened with a bated breath as Nagi explained the orders to them. The residential sector was as necessary for them if they live on the planet's surface, although the primary engine was seriously damaged. They still had the auxiliary engine. Sheltering energy would be indispensable if they wanted to live on as a civilization. And the lifehold, huh? We need to find this pronto. Phantom folded his arms and muttered. The lifehold was the immigrant ship's most important cargo. Most of the people who had departed Earth were asleep inside them.
My brother and parents are still asleep in them, so...
May muttered anxiously. The only people awake aboard at the White Whale were the crew members, military personnel, and lifehold system operators. It wasn't unusual for family members to be asleep in the lifehold. However, assuming they withstood the crash, the systems would shut off if their energy reserves had dried up, so they must do everything in their power to rescue the people sleeping in them before that happens. They weren't in any immediate danger, but they didn't have forever to wait around either. Alright, then we'll start our search for the rest of the ship first. The rest of Nagi's words caught in his throat. Hey, Nagi! Yes, I know. Phantom had sensed it too, for only a small amount of stars shone on the strange land at night, much like on Earth. Something was panting from darkness. Panting and stomping. If they weren't trying to hide their presence, they probably weren't intelligent. Most likely, They were native creatures. However, there was no difference between the danger of the aliens that wanted to exterminate the humans and the prowling native creatures. They would have to protect themselves from this approaching threat and more, on this unknown planet. Everyone, are your sidearms ready? The crew all nodded to Nagi's words. Alright, then, we'll take care of them from here. We'll be at a disadvantage and it's outside of the shelter. Any approaching creatures were likely nocturnal. The crew would have no chance of surviving if they were disorganized. Nagi spoke in as calm a voice as he could to prevent them from panicking. All hands, form a circle with your backs to the center. Focus your rifle on the entrance in front of you. Trust your backs and sides to the rest of the circle. Here they come. Human-sized figures jumped in from multiple visions in the bridge had a wall. Creatures that would later be called Silnias. They're docile while hanging from trees during the day, but at night they became ferocious. If they had dolls, there'd be nothing to fear from the creatures, but the bridge was only equipped with small caliber sidearms. Like battle assaults and attack assaults, it was assumed they would only need weapons to suppress mutinies on a spaceship's bridge, or fight hand to hand, so the lack of equipment was understandable. It would be a serious problem to have high-powered weapons around, as they might compromise the integrity of the hull. But right now, they were fighting without any concern over the ship's integrity. Nevertheless, they put up a brave resistance. Nagi's directions were precise, and they managed a successful counterattack. The young crew put their trust in Vando, whose imposing figure fell a strike assault towards the giant crack in the wall. Despite being a chief engineer, he had the dignity of a veteran soldier, and shot down another unknown creature with each pull of his trigger. It seems like we've held out. To judge Nagi's evaluation would be unfair. He was unprepared. There was too much they didn't know regarding the planet, and creatures that inhabited it. All sorts of generic abnormalities occurred here. There were individual creatures whose strength and intelligence at times, even body size, transcended that of similar species. At this time, one such transcendental creature, a Nova Red, appeared directly outside the bulkheads on the bridge of the White Whale. An enormous, far too enormous native creature. Nagi and the crew did not panic when it appeared through the gap in the wall. It is said that when faced with an incomprehensible sight, the brains of men become unable to process things properly. Everyone watched the gigantic creature in awe, and about too shocked to feel fear. Perhaps it appeared to be a messenger of the gods to them. They did not move at all as the gigantic creature raised what appeared to be its foreleg and swung downwards.
You and I sleep anyway.